Globalization is a process of increased interactions and connectedness between individuals, businesses, and governments across the world. The pandemic didn't help because it actually breaks the supply chains and actually encourage people to be even more anti-globalization. But if you look at the numbers, we have seen slowdown in exports from all the countries. And we also have seen less financial globalization in terms of cross-border investment and capital flows. The key drivers of deglobalization since 2008-2009 is partly related to the rise of populism, which itself is related to the increasing inequality driven by the hyperglobalization since the early 90s. Another reason is probably related to increased protectionist policies that we have seen around the world, in particular among advanced economies. There's also an economic reason for why globalization is losing steam. There is decreasing return to how much companies, including multinational firms, can get from engaging in global supply chains. China is actually playing a large role during the globalization period. But there's a silver lining that we have to focus on, which is after many years of globalization, China has successfully moved up the value chains, where more products as well as parts and components are now being produced in China. It also implies less international trade between China and the rest of the world. There's also less room for other countries to be engaged in global supply chains. Many supply chains that were developed mostly because of increased efficiencies and the benefits to youth workers that are paid at a much lower wage in developing countries. As I've said, individuals, governments, and companies become a lot more risk-averse, partly because they finally realize supply chains are a lot more fragile than what they have expected, partly because they realize all of a sudden they have been too dependent on the supplies from individual countries, in particular China. Global supply chains will become more fragmented and more regionalized because firms are going to focus more on just in case rather than just in time. They're going to think more about backup plans. They're not going to rely on one single supplier located in one single country. Diversification is going to be the key. Firms will continue to make money, but they will be less focused on maximizing profit and spend more time on building resilient global supply chains. It is not obsolete because I think there's still a lot for individuals and companies and economies to benefit from globalization. One very important theme in economics is called economies of scale. When people and companies can specialize in what they are good at, there will be surplus for exchanges and everyone will benefit. That said, there are winners and losers, and I think there are people who are left behind during the globalization period, and therefore I'm sympathetic to individuals and governments for their anti-globalization sentiments. But we shouldn't attribute the increase in inequality all to trade. Policies are also part of the reasons, and I think many advanced economies and also developing countries did not try to redistribute enough the gains from globalization to those who suffer during the process. We're going to see less globalization, which will affect efficiency, which may also lower economic recovery out from the pandemic. A silver lining of that is maybe countries and governments may have time to rethink about their strategies to globalization, and there will be more thoughts, hopefully, towards providing safety nets and reducing inequality that was driven to a very high level after years of globalization.